title today, It Is What It Is. It's a handy little phrase. And some people are more fond of it than others. I'm very ambivalent about the phrase, it is what it is. On the one hand, it can mean for me, depending on the context and the underlying motive of it, and the approach or the attitude reflected by the use of the phrase, it can demonstrate a healthy resignation, accepting and being content with the inevitable that you really can't do anything about. And I muttered it to myself one day when I was trying to negotiate the area around our garage with my truck that is much bigger than the Subaru that I used to have. And I'm not bashing Ford's design, but it's very difficult to see all the corners of this truck. And as I was trying to get out of there in a hurry, I nudged MJ's car that's parked there while he's at college. But to my amazement, Subaru's designed in such a way that it just popped out again where I nudged it. And as I did it the first time, I was saying to myself, well, it is what it is, you know, can't do anything about this. And I was wondering how I will submit this claim to the insurance or whether I'll submit it at all, you know, confessing that I can't drive in my own driveway. Damage to both vehicles on my insurance. And I was constructing a scenario where you would nudge the vehicle into the garage door, and then the project of the expensive exercise machine that you finally got out of the box and was trying to put together, when you would knock that over as well, and so forth and so forth. In that sense, it is what it is, I think, is as I say, an expression of a healthy acceptance of the inevitable, that you can't change anything about. But it can also be a reflecting on the other side, or the other hand, of a defeatism of surrender. Well, can't do anything about it. Let's just continue and try to avoid what is uncomfortable, what is difficult to face, and accepting too easily, there's nothing I can do about it. I think it remains in the end a choice for us to determine not only how we use that phrase, but how we live. What wisdom do we employ when we live? How do we live wisely, especially in a time like this, where we find ourselves, not only in the US or in Topsfield, but as humanity on our planet? What does it mean to live wisely? And what is the objective of living wisely? What is the objective of wisdom? We find one approach in the book of Ecclesiastes, and as Josh was reading that, I thought, geez, it's a tough endeavor to find God's wisdom or God's word in that passage of Ecclesiastes. It reflects, I think, to a large extent, the central theme of the book of Ecclesiastes, a collection of sayings or musings or the philosophy of an author that we don't know who it was. We just know that it wasn't Solomon, as some people would ascribe those passages or the words to. It's probably around 400 years after Solomon's time that it was put together, because the language reflects a much later Hebrew. Solomon, I don't think, was that wise that he could have anticipated how Hebrew would look 400 years from his lifetime and write in that style. It reflects an approach of uncommon wisdom, unconventional wisdom. Wisdom meaning for them at that time in the ancient Mediterranean and the ancient Middle East especially, what does it mean to live a good life, and how do you manage to do that? And wisdom The short version is, do what God wants of you to do, then you will be rewarded for it. Then, in their worldview or their perception, for the ancient Hebrews as well, it would mean that if you do God's will, the good things will plague you. You will live a long life, and you'll be healthy. You will have many children, specifically male children. It was a patriarchal society, male children. And you will be successful. If you are in business, you will do well in business, you will be rich. And you have this idyllic picture of everybody sitting under, as the Old Testament says, his own fig tree, drinking the wine from his own vineyard, this pastoral scene. You know, with your children and your grandchildren surrounding you, and you can see the little Israelites playing around while grandfather is drinking his wine from his own vineyard. That is the result of doing God's will. But then comes this spoiler of the scene with a razor-sharp honesty and an analysis that says, that is simply not true. That is nonsense. And I can use a stronger term, but I'll refrain from it, from the pulpit. That's nonsense. And the philosopher that wrote Ecclesiastes says, it doesn't work that way. Whether you do good or whether you do evil, there's no difference. In fact, there's no difference between animals and people. They all die, and then they disappear, and there's no way to say whether there's a difference in the afterlife, if there is any, between animals and people. So what is his conclusion? His conclusion is, since it's all useless, go for life and get out of it what you can. Draw up a huge bucket list and pursue it with commitment. Get it all while you can, because soon you will die. And one of the favorite phrases, my favorite phrases that he uses in his literature is to say, you know, at least when you're alive, you know that you're going to die, but once you're dead, you don't even know that. How's that for positive thinking? That is one approach. Since it's all useless, and there's no purpose in all of this, develop your own purpose, and your response to this useless life is make it useful and get out of it while you can. Get out of it for yourself what you can. That's one perspective, one approach, contained in our sacred text. And so often we try to whitewash it or try to force it and massage it into something that the book of Ecclesiastes is not. We ignore most of it except at funerals and sometimes at weddings. You read that passage from there is a time for everything. You know, it sounds nice. But that's not what the main message of Ecclesiastes is. It's that very, very almost sad expression of the futility of everything without any justice for anybody, except the justice that you grab for yourself. The total self-centeredness. Then we listen to another passage, a beautiful hymn from the early Christian church. Paul didn't compose that. That's much too elegant use of language for Paul. If Paul had to compile that, it would have been 50 pages long. You know, with such complex construction that you can't figure out, and you lose him more or less halfway through the first page. What is he talking about? This is very economical use of words. The beautiful hymn. After Paul was in conversation through a letter with the congregation, the church in Corinthians, conversation about what are the best gifts, because the congregation of the church would say, look at what these people are doing. They're healing people, they're speaking tongues, they have wonderful visions, and you want us just to, to be satisfied with gathering and listening to a calm exposition of the Scriptures. And you're just urging us to do good. There's nothing excited about that. We would like those spectacular and interesting gifts that the others around us, the other religions, have. And Paul works patiently through all of those. And then he concludes and says, after I've said all this in the usual complex way that Paul deals with stuff, he says, let me show you what the best gift is. Of all of this, of all the gifts, this is the best one. And then he takes this hymn that they probably knew and say, this is what it should be about. And if you read through that beautiful passage, I think one can encounter many things that is buried in there that you can say, the human way, the normal way for us to respond to life and to live our lives is contrary to what is written here. The first thing that we would normally do is to look after ourselves, self-preservation. That is very, very firmly part of our makeup. It's an instinct in us. And then this hymn says, no, love is not like that. And it carries on dealing with a variety of things that we normally would do. It says, no, this is not God's way. And how exactly love and faith and hope are intertwined and which one follows which, I honestly don't know. I think they're bundled together. If you ask Paul, he would give you a nice schematic and say, all right, this is how it works. This one follows that one, etc., etc. I can't do that. But I think being presented from our sacred text with two fairly seemingly contradicting passages, say this is God's word, both of them. These two mirrors are held up to us. And it is our choice to decide in front of which one do we want to stand. What is the choice that we make in the time that we live in? Because for the first time, as far as we know, in the history of life on this planet, our species have become so abundant in its presence. This planet has become so overpopulated with humans, especially if we approach it with the dominant value system that we seem to embrace. We have become so dominant that our existence is weaponized. Just by being human, we are threatening our own existence. Not by doing anything, just by being here, by breathing, by being present. Not even to think of, the potential for war, especially with the instability in the international arena and the level of technology, the sophistication in killing each other that we've reached. It is amazing, it is scary. It doesn't take an Einstein to say that we perhaps better take a pause and a time out and say, all right, what's going on, where are we heading? And perhaps start ruminating on the post-human existence or post-human life on the planet. I think cockroaches as probably the best probability to be the highest life form after we've done what we are good at. And how's that for competing with Ecclesiastes? For pulling the rug totally from underneath optimism. Fortunately, we do not have to say it is what it is and accept with resignation, this is all there is. We have a choice. And perhaps at a time like this, it is good to recall the words of Einstein as well. Said the world we live in today face problems that cannot be resolved if we continue to think the way that we thought when we created them. We cannot think in the same way and from the same paradigm live as when we created the problems that are destroying our planet and ourselves with all other life forms on this planet. How do we go forward? What does the phrase, "it is what it is," mean for us? I would like us to stand in front of the mirror of 1 Corinthians, that beautiful ancient hymn. Because in essence it speaks of self-transcendence. It speaks of the love of the Spirit that enables us to become a transforming force as individuals, as communities. It speaks to us and calls us to what is higher and what is beautiful and what is noble, to assume our sacred duty in our walk on this planet and into the future, which need not be the one that is a post-human future. And all life forms post-human. Whereas I say the cockroaches will probably be the highest life form. It calls us to walk with great caution and the realization of the responsibility we face. To embrace the Spirit and open ourselves to the Spirit so that our deepest instincts can be transformed from self-preservation to self-transcendence. We cannot, I think, in this post-truth era that we find ourselves in as well, we can no longer afford to be at war with science. Because I think science and proper scientific research is one of the things that can save us from ourselves, to provide knowledge that is indispensable for our walking into the future. As God's people, as a covenant community, it is what it is should mean for us to accept this responsibility. To walk the extra mile, because that is what we are called to when we say that we are Christian, when we accept that identity, when we say, yes, we follow in the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth. It is a given for us to walk in that way, to live in that way, to go the extra mile, and as in that litany that we participated in the beginning, when others give up and say, no, there is no common ground, it is our sacred duty to say, for the love of God and the love of humanity and the love of all life, we have to find the common ground and continue that process to search for it, to embrace it, and to use that as a first step into a better future. We have to, when others give up, continue to speak of forgiveness and of reconciliation. We have to, when others give up, go the extra mile and think of and speak of grace and continue to live in a hope-generating way. I've often wrestled, and I think I've shared it with you, with the concept of hope. What is it and how does it differ from pure positive thinking? Or when does it become just a Hail Mary pass? When you say, well, I've tried everything else, so let's try hope. Maybe, something will work out. And in the research of Rick Snyder, very recently, he's from Kansas. Where's our music director? He's also from Kansas. He gives me the Kansas thumbs up. Rick Snyder, a professor in psychology there. I found something that that I think is wise, and we often do that. When somebody says something that you like, you say that's a wise word, or that's a clever word, because you also think that way. But Rick Snyder, in his research about hope as well, said hope happens or is present when the individual or the individuals involved in whatever project at a certain stage can set goals that they feel is achievable and that they participate in. So there is an action element to it. And that differs, he says, from just plain positivism or positive thinking. There's a difference. He says hope has the ability to change the individual and to generate good outcomes. Because there is a feeling of, I'm part of this, and I can influence my own life and the life of those around us. And I think this is what Paul has at heart as well here, when he quotes this beautiful hymn. You that are God's people, assume your responsibility. Don't give me that conclusion of Ecclesiastes that is self-centered, that says, while life's a mess, I'll take care of myself. Paul urges in the words of that hymn, step up, open yourselves to the Spirit, and let the Spirit of God transform you so that you become a self-transcending being, so that your whole walk in life is one of hope-generating praxis, doing things that generate hope for yourself and for those around you. That is our calling in a time like this. Not cynical resignation saying, it is what it is, I can't do a thing about it, so let's enjoy it before it all goes bang, or it all winds down into nothingness. No, let the gospel for us not be the gospel of self-centeredness and self-preservation, but let the good news of Jesus Christ be and become for us, because of God's love for us, let our response fully be, we are God's people, in covenant with one another and with God, to do God's love, to live as hopeful, hope-generating people. Let that be our calling. Let that be what it is for us, so that there can be a future and a better future for us. Amen.